Hey YouTube, here we have a lead pipe with a brass flange right here. It is cracked and broken right here. It's slightly raised and bent. So what I'm hoping to do here is remove this old flange and replace it. I got a bunch of repair products, such as like this spanner right here, which can go underneath, but this is kind of lifted up and it was never screwed down. So I'm not sure what the hell this shit is. Almost looks like termite damaged wood or something like that on top of the subfloor, but I'm not sure if I put this spanner in underneath here how well it's going to hold up and secure the toilet down. If I can't bolt these, or if there's not much material underneath directly next to this to secure the flange to the floor to make sure the toilet doesn't rock. So I'm going to take a screwdriver and try and pry the lead away slightly from here. If it were cast iron, I could probably heat up the lead that was in between the cast iron pipe and the flange, but in this case I believe the lead pipe was hammered around the inlet against the flange to hold it in place. I bought a new flange, but as you can see, there's not much. The neck on this is not very long. They have one that is a little bit longer, maybe down to here, I don't know, an inch. And that was at the plumbing supply store. But of course, it is a Saturday, it's just about 5 o'clock, and pretty much everywhere other than like Home Depot and Lowe's closes at 5 or even before. So I'm going to see if I can get this removed. Alright, so now removing this material from around the pipe or the flange. So I'm not sure what this material is made of right here. So I'm going to hit it with a little bit of water, keep the dust down. I also put a mask on because I don't want to chance breathe any of this stuff if it's asbestos or lead based. Alright, so I removed most of the material that was around the underneath of the flange in this area. It might not be clear because I have a mask on right now, but all that's been removed, cleaned up, and now I want to see if I can actually remove this flange from the lead pipe. Again, this is a brass flange, and it looks like lead pipe that was hammered against this to hold it in place. And as you can see, no screws. I didn't remove the screws, they just were not there. So what I'm going to do now is hammer away around the edge, I already started right here, to release the flange from the lead pipe. I have a shim here, here, and back there. When I was hammering it, after I removed all that material from underneath, there wasn't much to really support the actual flange, and I didn't want to keep putting all that pressure on this old lead pipe or bracket or anything else in the wall. Last thing I want to do is open up the actual floor wall. So now that I got these in place, hopefully when I hammer around here, these will be taking the brunt of the force on the flange, which if it breaks, I'm trying to repair it anyway, so not the end of the world. I just don't want to pipe to break. I don't know if you could see that, but as I hammer around here, the lead is moving away from this brass bracket. So I think we got a decent amount of room now. We can try and pry it up. Oh, there we go. I had to fill the gap between the top of the floor and the bottom of the subfloor. It's 1¼ inches. The flange is roughly 1/4 inch, so I need an inch to fill. So I took 2 1/2-inch pieces of plywood, since I don't have a full inch of plywood at Home Depot. Clamped them together. I'm using a 5-inch hole saw, and this runs $38 at Home Depot, but I didn't want to use a jigsaw, and I figured I could use it in the future. Right here, the center hole, and then this is what I need to cut out. All right, so here we go. All right, so we now have a 5-inch hole. And now I gotta screw this into the subfloor. For those of you who are interested in using a hole saw to cut either a new subfloor or to add a spacer to the subfloor, a 5-inch hole saw will give you a perfect amount of gap right around this to give you a little bit of play, which will allow you to move this and center it perfectly. So as you can see, I got maybe 1/4 inch or so around all sides. They didn't have, I think it was a 4 3/4 or something like that I measured to make it a tight fit, but I'm glad I had something that was a little bigger. That way I have a little room to move this around. And it wasn't too big, so obviously you could see I have plenty of material on the sides to bolt the flange down to. Now before putting the flange back on the lead bend, I cleaned up the lead bend by sanding it lightly around the outside and the brim and just a tad bit on the inside. That way, one, if you were to solder it to the new flange, you need to clean up the actual lead so they can bond properly to the brass. And if you're not using that, using some other product that's like an adhesive, you want to make sure you have a nice bond between that, the brass flange, and the lead bend. So when you sand it, make sure you wear a mask, glasses, moisten the area so you don't get any lead dust in the air, and then make sure you use a disposable wet cloth to wipe up the area where you sanded. You don't want to be breathing or tracking any lead dust around the house. Next, I'm going to install my spacers. I have a 1/2-inch piece of plywood, and I use a 5-inch hole saw to cut a hole, and then I have a 3/4, same thing. I'm going to place this down and place this down on top. And then here's a new brass flange. You can see this has maybe about 1 inch of a neck, while the previous one that I showed earlier in the video pretty much just had almost nothing at all. So this will give me the extra amount of neck that I need, so that when I place this down, it'll actually meet up with all sides of the lead pipe. Because here it's a little higher, and then right here it dips down a little bit. I don't know if the previous person who remodeled, or if it was even original, I have no idea, broke that a little bit, but with this flange, it looks like I should be good. Now we're going to take our piece of plywood. In this case, it's 9 by 7.5, which is smaller than the hole, but really, I just needed to get it in there easily. So I'm going to take 1 1/2-inch piece of plywood, drop it on top. You can see the hole is larger than the actual pipe because I need to get the flange around here. I'm going to drop my second piece down. Now I got 1 inch of filler that I can bolt down. And then finally, I'm going to use a different flange that has more throat to it, but this will go on top. Mount the flange, these 3 bolts. I can slide my studs in there and bolt my toilet down. So once I put this flange in here, I'll have to hammer this lead up against the side, which was the opposite of what I did to remove the old flange, to create a seal after I screw this down. And then I'll have a brand new flange that is ready to have a toilet mounted to it. Once you have your flange lined up, make sure that these screws will be in an area where there's material. You don't want it to line up where these are here, because then it'll pull out when you actually screw down the toilet. So mark all your holes. I'm going to fasten these 2 boards down to the subfloor with 2.5-inch stainless steel screws. I use a T25 bit. And I'm going to fasten the flange down with 2.5-inch brass wood screws, which use a Phillips bit. Now pre-drill your holes. I decided I'm going to use 2-inch brass screws instead of 2.5-inch. Alright, now it's secured down to the subfloor and my spacers. So I got 4 screws here, 2.5 inch going through a 3/4 and 1/2 inch piece of plywood spacer down to the subfloor, and then 2-inch brass screws, brass wood screws going down through the flange. Instead of using lead solder, I have this product right here, which 2 plumbers in the plumbing supply store recommend after they overheard the conversation I was having with the person behind the desk. Person behind the desk recommended this as an alternative to soldering, and then 2 other guys said this is the way to go, especially if you're a novice at soldering. So there's a product called Plastic Seal. It makes fast repairs, seals soil pipe joints, and right here it says contains no VOC. Lead substitute, contains no lead. So this is made for filling in the gap and securing the lead pipe to the brass fitting, which is perfect because that way I don't have to get in here with a blowtorch and 1, risk melting the lead, and 2, they said just heating up this brass flange, it absorbs the heat and dissipates it so quickly that it's going to be a pain to solder this. So in that case, I'm going to try this material out and hopefully it does the trick. And they said it remains pliable so that even when in the future, if I go to remodel again, need to remove it, I should be able to cut it away. Alright, so now we're going to take the Plastic Seal. And I was told to do a thin bead and kind of force it down. In between the lead bend and the brass. Now they said to peen the lead bend against the brass to help seal it. That should create a nice seal between the lead bend and the brass. Put in your wax ring and I should have no vapor leak or leakage of any kind. So that was easy. I'm gonna let that sit for a sec and let it cure, just clean up a bit. And then I'm ready to start putting my wax ring and my toilet on here.